Welcome back to my channel. My name is Erica. Today we're going to be talking about fabric pre-cuts, how much I like to buy, and where I like to get it. So we're going to start off by talking about pre-cuts because especially if you're a newer sewer or quilter, you don't know what size is what comes in what bundle. So I'm going to clarify some of that for you, and then I'll come back and talk to you about yardage and show you how much I buy of that, how I store it, and where to get it. So let's talk about some of the pre-cuts, and I'm going to talk a little bit about yardage before I talk about where I get all my fabric. So let's start off with the smallest and we'll work our way up. So this is a mini charm, and these are 2.5 by 2.5 inch squares, and they are pre-cut for you. That's why they are called pre-cuts. And you will get one print from each of the prints in a particular line of fabric. So for this instance, there's probably 42 prints in here, and just makes for a really cute sampling of a fabric line. These are also great for bag making and other small projects. The next size is going to be a charm pack, and this is a 5-inch by 5-inch square pre-cut. And again, same deal, you'll get one print from each of the prints in a particular line. I've also used these in some of my bags. You can also use them for smaller patchwork quilts, baby quilts, and things like that. The next size I have here is the jelly roll, and this one is a 2.5 inch by width of fabric strip. So about 42 inches for a typical bolt of fabric. And these are great because there's a ton of fun jelly roll quilt patterns out there. I've made my jelly roll rug with these, and they're just a really fun, versatile pre-cut. And again, you're getting one print from each of the prints in a specific line, so about 42 prints. But pay attention to the listing, because if it's not a Moda jelly roll, sometimes Riley Blake, they have what's called roly-polies, and it's half the size because most of their lines have about 21 prints rather than 42. The next thing we have is a layer cake, and this is a 10-inch square, and again, one print from each of the prints in the line, and these are super versatile. I use these all the time in, you can do patchwork quilts, you can do pinwheels. There are a ton of different quilt patterns you can do using a layer cake. And if we take a look at all three of these together, you can see 10, 5, and 2.5. The next size up is going to be the fat eighth bundle, and a fat eighth is basically an eighth of a yard cut in half. So it's typically 9 inches by 21 inches for a typical bolt of fabric. And again, you're going to get one print from each of the prints in a specific line. There are a ton of things you can do with fat eighth quilts, and this is really a decent amount of fabric. You can get for sure at least one, if not more than one project out of one of these. So these are both fat quarter bundles, and fat quarter bundles are a quarter of a yard but cut kind of more in a rectangle. So a quarter of a yard is typically 36 inches cut into quarters, so 9 inches by width of fabric, and width of fabric would be selvage to selvage edge, and that's typically 42 inches. So if you had a quarter of a yard cut off of a bolt of fabric, you would have a 9-inch wide by 42-inch long strip. A fat quarter is taking that entire yardage, opening it completely, and then cutting it in quarters, so you actually get an 18 by 21 inch piece. So it's still a quarter of a yard, it's just a fat quarter of a yard, hence the name fat quarter. I personally prefer fat quarters for quilting because I feel like they're a lot more versatile. You can get a lot bigger blocks cut out of them, and with a quarter of a yard, you're kind of limited to a 9-inch wide piece at max. And then again, here they are. You can see, depending on the brand of your fat quarter bundle, you're going to have a different amount of prints. So just make sure you check the listing when you're purchasing online. It should tell you the size of your pre-cut. It should also tell you how many pieces you're getting in your bundle. Now let's talk about pricing, because obviously these are going to be different prices, but typically this is what you'll pay for these different bundles. So starting out with the mini charm is going to retail for about $4 to $5. The charm pack is going to retail for about $10. Jelly rolls retail from anywhere between $38 and $42. Layer cakes are anywhere from $38 to $40. Fat eighth bundles are anywhere from about $50 to $60 depending on how many prints. Fat quarters can range from anywhere between $60 to $100 depending on how many prints are in the bundle, also depending on supply and demand, because certain designers actually cost a little bit more than others because they have a higher demand. So I just like to shop around and see where I can find the best price based on what I'm looking for. So this is a bolt of fabric, and I keep this one on hand at all times. This is my favorite. So this is Moda Bella Solid. This is their 9900-97. This is what I use for 100% of my quilts. I always do a white background. I just think it makes everything really nice and bright and colorful, and it really makes the colors pop. And so I do buy it by the bolt. And then just look on your bolt, because right here on the end, it will tell you the exact length of your yardage. So this edge down here is the selvedge edge. And as you can see, it's kind of a fuzzy type. You can see some little holes in it. That's the selvedge edge. And so when we're talking about with the fabric is from selvedge edge to selvedge edge. And what that means, if we pull off a little bit of it here, is you can see that it's actually folded in half right here. And so from selvedge edge all the way around to selvedge edge is typically 42 inches of fabric. Now the end of your bolt will give you all that information on there, so you can see how wide your fabric is, because some fabric designers are different, and so you'll just want to pay attention to that when you're buying fabric for a specific project. Now when you get a bolt of fabric and you say I want a 1/4 of a yard, they're going to measure from 9 inches in from this edge, and they'll cut all the way down here. So 1/4 of a yard is actually 9 inches by width of fabric, so typically 9 inches by 42 inches. Typically most quilt shops will cut on the 1/4 yard. So 1/4 yard, a 1/2 yard, 3/4 of a yard, and 1 yard. A lot of times they won't do specialty cuts like 3/8 of a yard and things like that, but you just ask them and they'll tell you what their policies are. So this is a bolt of interfacing, and interfacing is going to be a little bit different. It is typically not folded in half, so it's single layer. And as you can see, this one's actually just slightly shy. It's about 20 inches as opposed to 21. So when you're buying fabric for a specific project, if it calls for a yard of fabric, make sure the interfacing yardage, because a yard of fabric is going to be almost, in this case, twice as much as a yard of the interfacing. So I just wanted to point that out. Again, all of that information will be down here on the end of your bolt. It will tell you what it is and how wide it is and all of that, so that you can calculate your purchase accordingly. And of course, you can buy fabric by the yard online, just like you can pre-cuts or anything like that. And then there'll usually just be a little drop down and you can say how much fabric you need. Now, one tip when I'm buying yardage is I typically will get just a little bit more than I think I'm going to need. One, just in case I screw up or, you know, cut something the wrong way. And two, just because it's really unfortunate to run out of fabric in the middle of a project and then try and have to get that same exact fabric again. And especially with whites, if you don't remember what you purchased, it can be kind of tricky because there are a lot of different whites out there. And speaking of that, that's why I decided to pick a white I like and just stick with it. I have a scrap bin of white fabric back here. And anytime I'm cutting a quilt or any extras, I'll put all those scraps in that scrap bin back there, and then I know they're all the same tone of white, and I don't have to worry about if I mixed 2 different whites together, because trust me, there's nothing more frustrating than making a whole quilt, pulling some stuff from your scrap bin and realizing that you have 1 or 2 pieces of white in there that are not the same color as all the other whites. Now let's talk about how much fabric I typically buy for quilting. This is going to be way different if you are sewing garments. In that case, you're going to want to follow that pattern. But sometimes I'll see a fabric that I really, really love, and I know it would be a perfect quilt backing or quilt binding, but I don't have an actual pattern in mind. So how much am I going to purchase? So a lot of times if I see a fabric line that I really like, I will go ahead and buy some pre-cuts for it. Fat quarter bundles are one of my favorites. I also have recently fallen in love with fat eighth bundles. They're a little bit less expensive than fat quarter bundles, but there's still a lot of fabric in them, and you can get a really good size quilt out of a fat eighth bundle. So those are my 2 favorites, but I also encourage you that if you see a pattern you like, look and just see what the fabric requirements are for it on the back. A lot of times quilts will be pre-cut friendly, and they'll tell you exactly what you need on the back. And especially if you're a new sewer or quilter, just get the ones that they are recommending, and then you'll be good to go. You'll have some scraps left over, and then as you get more comfortable with quilting, you can decide what pre-cuts you prefer and what you don't. Another great resource for pre-cuts is the Moda Bake Shop website. They have a ton of free patterns on there that are specifically designed for pre-cuts, so you can look up jelly roll or layer cake or whatever you have on hand, and there'll be some fun patterns that you can do that are specifically meant for that pre-cut. So I'll put a link for that in the description box below. But let's go ahead and talk about yardage. So for backing, I typically buy 4.5 to 5 yards of quilt backing. That's going to get me about a queen or so size quilt backing. And even if I decide to do a king size quilt, I can always put in another strip of fabric, or sometimes I'll even sew extra accent blocks and just use those. So I'll do like a strip that's the backing fabric, a strip of accent blocks, and then the backing fabric. And that can make my 4 to 5 yards of backing fabric go even farther. So here is a sample of some backing fabric that I did, and this is about 5 yards. I've used just a little bit of it for a different small bag project that I was making. And I just store them on these comic book cards, and these are just kind of a heavier cardstock, you can see, and they really just help when I'm putting them back here on my shelves. Keeps everything standing up nice and neat, especially if you are doing a binding where you're having a little bit less fabric and they get all floppy. So it just helps everything stay in my shelves just nice and neat. So for backing fabrics, 4.5 to 5 yards. For binding fabrics, I typically go 3/4 to a yard of fabric. That will usually get me enough binding fabric that I need to go around, whether I'm doing a mitered binding or a straight cut binding. And again, I keep them stored on these nice little cards, keeps everything nice and neat, and I can just kind of slide them in my shelves back there. They're kind of just like little mini bolts. So binding, 3/4 to a yard of binding fabric. So if I just see some fabric that I really like and I'm just not sure what I'm going to use it for, I will go ahead and buy about those yardages for my binding and my backing. And same goes for quilt batting, about 4 to 5 yards for quilt batting. I tend to buy a little bit more for the batting. So now that we've talked about pre-cuts, we've talked a little bit about yardage, let's go ahead and talk about where some of my favorite places are online to buy fabric. Now, I do want to quickly toss out that, especially now during COVID, I highly recommend that you support your local quilt shops. I love supporting smaller businesses, and it can be really hard for them in times like this. And a lot of them are offering curbside pickup right now, so I do like to shop at my local quilt shops if I can. But let's talk about online options, just in case that might not be an option for you right now. So one of my top places to purchase fabric from is Fat Quarter Shop. Fat Quarter Shop has some great prices. They always have some of the more current fabrics in stock, and they're doing a really good job. I know some of their shipping's been a little bit behind right now because of COVID, but normally they're very fast on shipping, and they do send out notifications if they're getting behind, just so that you know your products are still coming and not to worry about them. They also have amazing customer service, so if you have any questions or comments or concerns, you can call in and talk to them, and they're just super kind and helpful. So Fat Quarter Shop is one of my favorite online resources for quilting. The other cool thing about the Fat Quarter Shop website is you can search by designer, you can search by pre-cut, and you can search like kits and all those kinds of things. So they make it really easy for you to be able to find what you're looking for. One of my second favorite places to shop for fabric is Missouri Star Quilt Co. They have great prices. They also have special deals. So does Fat Quarter Shop. They have like daily deals and things like that. So if you're on their emailing list, you'll get those notifications. And if it's something you're interested, you could take advantage of those sales. The other place that I really do quite a bit of shopping on is Etsy. Etsy has some great small business fabric shops on there, and they have great prices. You can shop around, you can type in exactly what you're looking for, and with Etsy you do kind of have to type in exactly. Their search feature isn't great, so if you misspell a word or something like that, it will be like, I don't know what you want. So just make sure you know what you want when you go to Etsy, but you can type in something like Moda Fat Quarter Bundle or Fat Eighth Bundle or Mini Charm Pack or whatever, and it will bring up all of the results that match that, and you can kind of just look through and see what you're after. You can even be really specific and search for the designer, the pre-cut, and maybe the manufacturer, and that'll really narrow down your search results. I like Etsy because, again, it's kind of small business owners that are on there, and a lot of times you can find hard to find fabric on Etsy. So where some of the larger stores might be sold out, you might be able to find an Etsy dealer, or a person like me. Like, for example, I have an Etsy account, and sometimes I will sell some of my old stash that I'm not going to use on there. So you can sometimes find really great deals on older out-of-print fabric that you can't find anywhere else. So highly recommend Etsy. Another one of my favorite places to shop is catchingstitches.com. Her and I do a lot of collaborations together, and she does a lot of kits for my quilt patterns. She always has great prices, and she has up-to-date fabric, and so she has usually a pretty good selection. She also does a 5-yard cut sale, and so what she does is she picks fabrics that she thinks will make really great quilt backings, and she sells them 5 yards at a time, kind of like I mentioned. I buy 5 yards for my backing, and she'll put those on sale, so you can actually get a really great deal on 5-yard backings. So if you're not following her on Instagram, I highly suggest doing that. She notifies you there anytime she's having a sale on any of her things. She also does sales on some of the pre-cuts as well. And then lastly, pay attention to your favorite fabric designers, because a lot of times they will get extra fabric in of their lines, and so they will sell them on their own Etsy or sometimes on their own website, and you can, or they'll do giveaways or special deals on extra fabric that they have in their stash. So make sure you're following some of your favorite fabric designers, because a lot of times you can find some fabric from them. It helps support them, just another way to help support them, and plus you can get some great deals on some of their older yardage. And then lastly, when shopping online, I just like to kind of stick to manufacturers that I'm familiar with. That way I know I'm going to be getting good quality fabric. A lot of times you'll order fabric online, and if you can't see it and touch it, it's a little bit, I don't know, kind of intimidating, I think, because you're not 100% sure what you're going to get. So sticking with designers like Moda, Riley Blake, Poppy Cotton has great fabric. Art Gallery Fabrics, Free Spirit Fabrics. I've been pretty happy with all of those lines, and I think I get really nice feeling quilting cotton. It doesn't feel cheap or thin. I haven't had, you know, a lot of bleed issues with some of those lines. But that's just my kind of personal thing. I just like to kind of know what I'm getting in the mail, so when it comes, I'm not disappointed in quality or consistency or whatever. So that's going to be it for today's video. We covered pre-cuts, we covered yardage, we covered where we get all that and what to look for. Hopefully you found it helpful. If you did, please make sure to thumbs up and subscribe to this channel. That really helps me out. If you have any comments or tips for fellow crafters, leave those in the comments below as well. That way we can share and learn from each other. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video, and I will see you next time.